So it's my pleasure to share with you a recent lecture that I gave at the San Diego Shoulder Institute. The San Diego Shoulder Institute is the oldest shoulder meeting in the world at 41 years. And I was invited to give a presentation on the digital episode of care as a new paradigm for orthopedic care, but in particular, shoulder surgery. And I want to acknowledge the work of my assistant, Sarah Koljaka, who helped put this presentation together. I have a conflict of interest here, and you can see in the center column some of the companies that could represent a conflict of interest, as well as on the right side. But I'm not going to talk about any specific products, and if I do, I'll show alternatives as well. So take this with a grain of salt. Now, I grew up and went to school before there was much digital anything. And in fact, I used a slide rule for inorganic chemistry when I was in college. I'm giving this presentation in the spirit of Codman, and the Codman Shoulder Society is a place where you can find similar lectures and presentations. But Codman said that we should measure the end result in order to determine for every patient best practices and optimize outcomes. And that's exactly why the Codman Shoulder Society was started. But he was also an entrepreneur in his thinking. And he said, give me something that's different, for there's a chance of it being better. And frankly, digital technology will most certainly create value for all stakeholders here. And let me explain why I think that's the case. If you want more information about this, in 2023, during our 7th annual meeting, we considered a variety of different technologies and their potential impact. And you can simply go to the Codman Shoulder Society in order to view this as it's posted on ViewMedi as well as YouTube. Let's start first with the dollars. If we look at the global spend of orthopedic care in the fiscal year 23, that was over $57 billion, and it's growing year over year at a rate of about 3.5%. If we look at orthopedic product by segments, then if we consider extremities, that's not quite $3 billion, but that's also the upper extremity and the lower extremity, exclusive of hip and knee. And then if we consider so-called enabling technologies, we're talking about surgical planning, robotics, navigation, etc. And that constitutes about 2.1% of the overall annual spend in orthopedics. Now, I like to think about the episode of care from the standpoint of the digital episode of care. And this is, in fact, where we're going now, with more and more companies focusing on these tools. You can see in yellow are the digital tools that are going to be applied both before surgery, during surgery, and in the aftercare of surgery. So I'm interested to explore these and to see what value that they may provide. But we should first start at education, and this is ripe for disruption because education isn't succeeding in making surgeons who don't make errors as they move forward. There's a learning curve associated with any new technology, and our goal should be to reduce this learning curve because that will create value for our patients. So some time ago, I was asked to compare some of the digital technology we have to gaming. And in fact, when I Googled this, I came up with over 63 million results. And right now, we're really in the early market phase. This is used by technology enthusiasts and visionaries, but we've not crossed the chasm into the mainstream market. That will require more evidence before implementing this on a broader scale. So starting with education, it was Einstein who said learning is experience and everything else is just information. These are 3 companies that are very much engaged in trying to disrupt education. And our goal should be to shorten the learning curves and thus deliver better value sooner for patients. And we can do so by improving skill acquisition, reducing costs, and engineering error avoidance. And here's an example of the real world compared to the virtual world and how we can simulate what we might do in the real world virtually. And you can see here the step of doing a humeral osteotomy for a shoulder arthroplasty can be simulated very well. And this can be on-demand education or education in the metaverse, connecting with experts. And I don't think there's any question that this is going to provide value by reducing the learning curve and improving surgeon skills before they even go into the operating room. And you can do this with all the steps of the operation using power tools as well. So let's move on to virtual planning. And the question is there value in virtual planning? And clearly there is, since every major shoulder company is applying this, and it's become an integral part of their digital solution. Now, we know that patient-specific planning has its greatest impact on low-volume surgeons because when they do it, they start to make decisions that are more like more experienced surgeons, because every time we plan, we learn, and in particular, we learn what not to do. So we can make our errors virtually. Here's an article that pointed out that the major impact of planning really is to change the decision-making process, and surgeons now, because they're in a three-dimensional world in planning, are much more accurate in their decisions from the standpoint of best selection of treatment than they were just simply dealing in a two-dimensional world. So it was Joe Ionati who pioneered this area and demonstrated that preoperative planning software dramatically improves errors in placement of glenoid components. And this clearly represents a value proposition. What about navigation? Well, we can use navigation with optical solutions or with a device you wear on your head, in this case, the HoloLens. And these are being adopted more and more by a variety of different companies. Let's now talk about the value of augmented reality and mixed reality. And you can see here on the left, mixed reality is taking a virtual three-dimensional model of the shoulder into the operating room and using it for referencing adjacent to the operative field, or frankly, even navigation. So both augmented reality and mixed reality improve how users visualize information and receive and follow instructions and interact with the products. It's been said that augmented reality becomes part of the product and part of the value chain. And in fact, mixed reality is no different. So if you look in the upper right, you can see a surgeon using mixed reality in the operating room. And in the lower right, you can see augmented reality helping with venipuncture reproducibility and reliability by simply augmenting what the individual who's providing the service is looking at. What about the robots? Well, it's been said robots are coming, but in fact, robots have already arrived, and they've been used extensively in hip and knee, and soon there will be one and then even more robots available to help surgeons in the operating room. Now, why is the timing right for all of this? All of these major companies that are working in this space certainly have an interest in disrupting healthcare and collaborating with healthcare providers. And in fact, this has been called the fourth revolution when you talk about artificial intelligence, and I'll dwell on that a bit. Michael Porter, who is a former professor at Harvard Business School, wrote an article in Harvard Business Review entitled "Why Every Organization Needs an Augmented Reality Strategy." And he stated as a key component here, dramatically reducing errors and increasing productivity in factories. Well, there's no reason that that can't be extended into healthcare. And in fact, if we look at artificial intelligence and machine learning, that could easily substitute for what Porter wrote about. Now, this slide was given to me by Jean Chouy, who has been a pioneer in digital technology. And he basically said that artificial intelligence is a study of how to make computers do things which at the moment people are better. Now, there's a lot written about this in terms of the growth of artificial intelligence, and this is in book form, it's in Harvard Business Review, and even in the Wall Street Journal. And Hollywood is way ahead of healthcare in terms of science fiction anyway. And you can see this book on the left creates anxiety about what artificial intelligence might mean overall to mankind. And I think that is probably more science fiction than science right now. So if we look at where we are currently, we have artificial narrow intelligence. And this is basically machine learning that helps individuals specialize in one area and solve problems. Where we really want to go optimally is into artificial general intelligence. And this is where the computer is as smart as a human being and augments what we can do as surgeons, if we're talking about shoulder surgery. And what's really interesting is that artificial intelligence is growing at 2 times the rate of Moore's law, which is computing power growth. And that's probably going to accelerate even more, so that the changes that are happening in faster than 1 year time period. Now, this is relevant as well if you look at the post-operative recovery program that patients follow, because we can measure the speed of that recovery. And this is a graph that shows you the difference between shoulder replacement reverse and total shoulder versus biceps tenodesis and arthroscopic rotator cuff repair. There's no reason that we can't use this information to help patients recover. And that's certainly important. And what we can see now coming about it are digital tools that allow the patient to recovery, both with app-based protocols and other methods. And these are a number of companies that are doing this. You know, they're early to the game, and we'll have to see how much this disrupts in terms of providing value for postoperative recovery. When I went to business school, I was very interested to understand innovation in the context of what I do as a surgeon. And there's been much written about this. And if we look back at the evolution of digital technology, then Steve Jobs' quote is very timely. He said that everyone here has a sense that right now is one of those moments when we're influencing the future. And he was talking about Apple. So I thought, why don't we look at this from the standpoint of what industry thinks, because they provide the tools we use, and what surgeons think. And let's look for blind spots, and let's look for alignment. So I surveyed the American Shoulder Elbow Surgeons, the European Shoulder Elbow Society, and the Codman Shoulder Society, and have a total of 191 responses. In industry, I asked the 9 largest companies that are providing these tools for orthopedic surgeons, and in particular shoulder surgeons, of which 6 answered the survey I sent. So first of all, if we look at all of the surgeons answering, you can see the different colors represent their different organizations that they're part of. And the vast majority of individuals answering this fashion themselves as shoulder surgeons first and foremost. When I asked how many years you've been in practice, you can see there's a broad range here. And what percent of your practice is shoulder arthroplasty? It turns out that it's somewhere between 10 and 50% for the people who answer. And when I asked them how many shoulder replacements they do per year, the vast majority do 40 or more per year, which means that we have opinions of experts here by and large. I then asked them, do you do preoperative planning? And the vast majority do preoperative planning. But as you'll see in a moment, there's some confusion about what that exactly means. If I asked them if you use planning tools, they also answered yes. But let's see what they think about what tools they might use. So when I asked them to clarify what tools they use, interestingly, the minority said virtual reality planning. But I think there was some confusion about what that really is, because if you look at the blue box for Codman Shoulder Society, the red box for the American Shoulder Elbow Surgeons, and the green box for the European Society, many of the things that they categorize under other actually fall into the category of virtual reality planning. So there's some confusion about what that really means. And so surgeons probably will have difficulty differentiating in this category. That's really up to industry to clarify. I asked, do you use any of the following technology to execute your plan in the operating room? And you can see here that there are different options available, including augmented reality, mixed reality, navigation, and of course, robotics is not yet here in scale. And then the other categories, as you can see here, again, include patient-specific guides and 3D printed models, which actually are used quite extensively in lieu of these kinds of tools for digital accuracy in the operating room. When I ask surgeons what your expectation is for how digital technology can further your tools in doing shoulder arthroplasty, the overwhelming number 1 choice was artificial intelligence. And it was selected because of the potential for prediction, guiding the procedure that was selected, and also guidance in preoperative planning. But all these other tools are on the list, and you can see under the category of other what individuals felt didn't fall exactly into one of these categories. When I asked what surgeons wanted to see coming from industry, again, the number 1 priority was artificial intelligence and machine learning. And you can see a close second was virtual reality planning. And under the category of other, again, you see some confusion about what all these different things are. So again, surgeons have some confusion here. Now, I want to point out that immersive virtual reality, including working in the metaverse with individuals, is on the list. It's just simply not high on the list. And I think that reflects that that's relatively early in its process of insinuating itself into education and disrupting education. Then I asked, is there a need for postoperative management tools? And over 70% of surgeons said yes. Now, what do we mean by that? I'll show you in a moment, but I want to point out that when we get to the company part of it, this is a blind spot for most companies. So when we looked at the average ranking here, the number one ask was for a post-operative recovery tool that was app-based. But there were other things that were listed, including patient-reported outcomes, measuring range of motion virtually, and applying AI into the process. Now, when I went to the companies, first of all, I asked them what their strategy was for the short term and the long term when it came to digital technology and its application into shoulder arthroplasty. And as you can see here, there is some overlap and some inconsistency, with the number one priority now being either preoperative planning or executing in the operating room. And each company probably has a different focus, and they may or may not be entirely clear about what that focus is, or prefer not to share because of risk of affecting their competitive advantage. When I asked them about their priorities in terms of application of digital healthcare in shoulder arthroplasty, not surprisingly, they listed as number one artificial intelligence and machine learning. So in that regard, they're aligned with the surgeons. But if you go down this list here, you'll see a variety of things, and towards the mid-range or below the average is postoperative recovery using digital healthcare tools. So there appears to be a difference in what companies are developing and what surgeons may also want in this category, because this is basically about the recovery process. Then I asked how the companies thought digital healthcare will create value in shoulder arthroplasty, and the number one item was reducing errors, which is great because patients suffer for our learning curves. And if we change our learning curves and make them faster, we'll provide better value for our patients. But the information that can be gathered with digital tools can inform on best practices, and potentially we can influence efficiency and improve education, and in the process, lower cost. Then I asked these companies about their value proposition in digital healthcare from the standpoint of shoulder replacement. You can see their answers were relatively short here, but reflected their overall strategy in the question I just addressed. And I asked them about their strategy for artificial intelligence in the episode of care. And frankly, there was a lot of confusion here, everything from under evaluation to improved efficiency, to some kind of improvement of clinical outcomes, etc. Now, why is this important? I'll get to that in a moment. But if we look at the priority of these companies, I was surprised to see, but happy to see, that the customers who were the surgeons were number one, followed closely by patients, and then by hospitals. And at the bottom of the list, actually, were their employees and their shareholders. So this is interesting because when I asked about the business model for digital healthcare, everybody answered other and said things like under evaluation or unknown at present. And my read on this is that most of these technologies are not going to be direct revenue tools, but they're going to be indirect in terms of creating a stickiness for the hardware products that are used. So imagine what we're talking about here is a digital platform to drive a hardware pipeline. So to return to what Steve Jobs indicated in terms of the moment we now have to influence the future, let me summarize a little bit, and then let me quote Sam Altman from OpenAI. So the conclusions that I would offer you are that digital tools are definitely in our future. Artificial intelligence will be most impactful, but the business model in orthopedics is unclear. And orthopedics is actually relatively behind other healthcare specialties when it comes to application of AI. Shoulders even more behind in orthopedics, and the value for patients will be enormous when it comes to reducing errors and predicting outcomes. The key to all of this is that engineers have to work with surgeons and academics, and industry is very important if we want to scale any of this. Now, Sam Altman said that artificial general intelligence should be an amplifier of humanity, and we need to maximize the good and minimize the bad. And he also said that all benefits of artificial general intelligence must be widely shared. So this is why there's a confusion perhaps about the business model. And we should certainly proceed cautiously and minimize risks. Thank you.